This is the story of how the UK invented the future. Here in Britain's manufacturing heartlands, the Industrial Revolution began, changing everything. Where 3 centuries ago, these first mills and blast furnaces kick-started mass production and the greatest economic leap in history, pulling millions out of poverty. But today, when you make pilgrimages to these sites, ground zero of the modern world, it's impossible to avoid another lesson, as the waste thrown up by generations of growth and consumption threatens to cause irreversible damage to the planet. Posing the question, can Britain, the country which invented industrialised pollution, become the first major nation to end it? For much of that history, Humberside was at the heart of Britain's economic engine. Oil refineries, coal plants, factories, and here in Grimsby, under the iconic Victorian Tower, the fishing trawlers which fed us. Like those old monuments today, much of it lies abandoned. Only a fraction of the fishing community remains.
55, 65, 65, Premier.
This is Grimsby Fish Market. We have fish come into the grading area from all parts of the country and from abroad.
Another 5p in the yours.
It's all sold individually.
They are then check 410, 10, 15, 20, 5, 30, 430.
This is like the last generation at the moment. There's not many young merchants on here.
Right.
Across the road from the fish market, you'll find John and his business partner Louise's shop. They're the last ones left on the street.
But if you go round, look down all the side streets, and they've all got a story to tell. This was all full as little as, what, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. There was both buzzing. I mean, look, this was a very busy place. Norman Rogers, then there was a smokehouse, Quality, Donnelly's. Now all you'd bump into is a wild cat. And this is how it ends up, as you can see.
Once upon a time, in that industrial past, Britain and its economy ruled the waves. But there is an alternative, darker version of history. In the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution kick-started economic growth and modern capitalism, but only at the cost of pumping out millions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere as the years ticked on by. From iron and steel production to coal and steam power, plants and factories, and for centuries, Britain was the only name in the game. The world's economic engine, the world's richest economy, and by far the world's biggest polluter. But just look at what happens at the start of the 20th century. America finally begins to overtake us. But these ever-increasing bars tell another story. The richer we've got, the more we've polluted. And it all comes back to the fact that we never put a price on waste. Until now. Because with scientists predicting a climate catastrophe, and with China pumping ever more pollution into the atmosphere, the greatest challenge of the next century is going to be managing this carbon debt. The debt that Britain started. So what to do about it? John Gunner is chair of the Committee on Climate Change, which advises the government on green policy.
What we need to do is to get to the point at which we are no longer contributing to the growth of climate change. I mean, that is a duty to do that, because we started the Industrial Revolution, which has caused the problem. And when you start something and get rich by it, then you have some responsibility to repair it.
And now the government have committed to zero emissions, the big questions are how to do it, how much will it cost, and might there even be some money-making opportunities?
Industry is increasingly understanding that this is where its profit's going to be. I mean, there won't be big oil companies if they stick to oil. So it's existential for them. I sense a huge change.
A huge change and a huge opportunity for the Humber estuary. As you travel along its banks from Grimsby to Immingham to Hull, you sense a region shifting its gaze from past glories towards an industrial revolution in the making, a green industrial revolution. A few yards from those old abandoned fishing shops and smokehouses, you will find this place. This is the base for Oersted. Once upon a time, Denmark's national oil company, it has now shifted into wind farms, a trade that promises to transform the local economy.
So you've got quite a few of my family members who actually dealt back in the day in the fish markets.
And over here on the other side, it's kind of the future.
Yeah.
Dave is one of the apprentices working on keeping those turbines turning.
Before I got my job here, I was actually involved in a company that produced plastic, single-use plastic, and it wasn't somewhere that I wanted to be. The employee didn't share that same ethic that I do. I'm quite passionate about sustainability and about climate change. My generation always heard stories about how the fishing industry, it was amazing, and everyone had money in their pockets and money to spend. But I think this industry now, it's shedding a light, and it's giving people hope now that Grimsby could actually be back to how it was, back to Great Grimsby.
Britain is unusually well placed to benefit from wind power. But what about when the wind isn't blowing, or for that matter, the sun isn't shining? The answer is you need backup. Here at the mouth of the Humber estuary, a lot of the focus is on what's going on out there, offshore wind, and thanks to falls in prices and technology advances, that could provide the majority of UK power in the future. But if you want a constant stream of green electricity, you actually need to look inland, down the estuary, towards something that on the face of it doesn't look all that green. This is Drax. It used to be the biggest coal-fired power station in Western Europe. Today it mostly burns biomass, wood pellets, but they still produce carbon, actually more than coal, so they're working on a plan to remove the CO2 emissions from the chimney. And how's that going?
These pipes that are going up and down here are big enough to capture, basically to affect that process for 1 ton a day.
Okay, how much are you pumping out?
So we put out as much as 4 million tons a year from each of our 6 units.
As you probably gathered, this technology isn't there yet, and getting it there will cost, well, no one quite knows.
Frankly, one of the reasons why we're doing the pilot project here is to actually work out exactly what we think the costs will be.
Okay, and then you talk to them and you say it's going to be X billions, and then that does have to come out of people's pockets in the end.
Yeah, so ultimately, as a society, we have to all decide that there's something that's a challenge we want to take on, and that's something that we should pay for. I mean, I believe we should, but it's not for me to decide. But a society will have to absolutely cover the cost.
There's no way it's going to be free.
It's not going to be free.
But there is a pattern with expensive things. They don't always happen. Back on the road to Grimsby is Killingholme. That old demolished power station was supposed to be replaced with a working carbon capture plant, like that pilot at Drax but full scale. It was due to be up and running in 2020, next year, but in 2015 the government cancelled it. Too expensive. And when it comes to actually imposing the green taxes to pay for this stuff, it's mostly talk and no action. Consider what happened with petrol taxes over the past few years. In 2010, the government was planning a big increases in fuel duties, but knowing how unpopular that would be, they lost their nerve. And not just once. In fact, every single budget since then, the planned increase in fuel duty has been cancelled, so that even as the emissions from the vehicle sector have increased, the amount of tax we get from it has actually gone down in real terms. Might that be about to change though? A new Sky data poll has found that the proportion of people supporting green taxes is up from 37% in 2015 to 52% today. However, when asked whether they wanted to pay more in petrol taxes, only 36% of people said yes, 49% of people still said no. And that's the problem with going green. Everyone loves it in theory, up until they're told they'll have to pay for it. Especially if, like the fish workers in Grimsby, all that green investment is spent on the other side of the fence.
When people say, oh, it'll be great because, you know, Grimsby is going to be a pioneer in clean energy and that's going to be...
Yeah, it might be, but it ain't going to help the fish.
No, not at all.
It isn't.
The
far
investments
from it.
over there, where the wind farms are, I mean, you can see our amount of money going into that. And this is like this. This has been like this for 15 years.
One of the things that they say, you know, to get a kind of green economy, they're going to have to raise green taxes, and one of the green taxes is fuel duty. Would that be a concern for your business?
It'll be a concern for everybody because everybody
it'd be
uses
terrible.
fuel.
We pay enough
Everybody.
in charges on fuel as it is.
I'm sensing some scepticism about the grand green vision that the government is quite keen on.
Yeah.
Even though that might be bringing some jobs into town.
Oh yeah. From Denmark, maybe.
It's probably moving jobs
You ask
from
anybody.
here to there.
Do you know anybody that works on the wind farms? Because I don't.
Yet the shift is coming. We'll also have to replace nearly every boiler and heating system in the country. And since there's no sign yet of electric planes, the amount of aviation we permit will have to be limited, with major implications for airports wanting to build new runways.
If Heathrow is built, it has to be built within the envelope, but of course it has knock-on effects. It means that you can't build similar things elsewhere in the country. You're not going to be able to have expansions of a different kind elsewhere. You can't have it and other things.
One implication is that if the green revolution takes off so much that Humberside also wants a new runway, it may not be allowed. Yet another trade-off we'll have to confront. But according to the man who wrote one of the first major reports on the economics of climate change, we're running out of time.
The science is much scarier than it was even in 2006 when we published. It was pretty scary then, but it's much worse now. I mean, the concentrations have been going up, emissions have been going up, a lot of the effects have been coming through faster than we thought. The science is definitely more worrying.
Perhaps the scariest thing is that there is only so much we can do. The idea is for Britain to freeze its bar by 2050. That's what net zero emissions really means. But we're only one part of the story. What about other countries? Britain may still be one of the world's biggest carbon debtors, but right now most of the pollution is coming from China, and they're still going through their version of our industrial revolution. But who knows? Perhaps in future it won't just be those old industrial revolution landmarks like the first Iron Bridge people come to Britain to see. Will our descendants pay homage to these new monuments of this green industrial revolution as symbols of how we learned how to grow without polluting the earth?